thank God again that we can be with you this week. We trust that you will be blessed as you stay tuned. All across this beautiful land of Guyana, we welcome you in the Caribbean and further field. We thank God that you be with us and that your life will be changed as we share from the Word of God. Your families will be blessed. And we pray that you will invite someone. Stay tuned. God bless you.
Last week we continued looking at the topic superabundant increase by examining the text 2 Chronicles 13, 14, 30, 32 and 2 Kings 4. In these scriptures we see how the people of God prospered and survived the different ordeals as they were committed to prayer and they trusted God for deliverance. It was clearly demonstrated that God superintends over the affairs of men and has the power to break the bonds of wickedness. He is moved by our effectual fervent prayer, and this was quite evident in the story we described with respect to Sennacherib and how he besieged Israel, and God through the power of prayer came through and delivered the people. An important observation that was made also is that there's a relationship, a strong relationship or connection between prayer and preparation. So we can trust God, but we must also be prepared for God when He's about to make His move. So this evening we want to continue examining this topic, superabundant increase.
Superabundant increase seem to require a certain level of relationship with God, not just to attract it, but to be able to manage it. It seems as human beings, we have the capacity that when we are exposed to certain kinds of privileges, we sometimes seem to lose our way, we seem to become arrogant, puffed up, full of ourselves, trying to treat people as if they are dirt. And it is that relationship with God that helps us not just to enjoy the resource, but to allow that resource to filter into the community where others will benefit. I love Micah 6:8 that says, what God requires of you as He exposes and releases the abundance that He has in store, He requires of every one of us to do justly, love mercy, walk humbly. And so I pray that as we attract and submit ourselves to God's will, and He releases that privilege that He has prepared for us, that we will not lose the connection that is necessary. That's why prayer is so important. You will maintain that line of communication so He will be able to speak to all of us as we continue to manage superabundant increase.
Superabundant increase imposes upon us, each one of us, a responsibility to understand the task at hand.
Yeah.
Sometimes we give that activity over to the political leaders and we relegate ourselves to followers. But God did not only make political leaders, He made leaders in every sphere of life. So in the home, it is not the elected political leadership that could lead your home. The father, the parents there, they have that duty to lead their family. They have that, the father has that responsibility to chart the course for his family. In the community, they are leaders who are elected, but then if you observe communities all around the world, there are people who never run for office, but they lead in the community.
So true.
And there are people in offices who may not be the top honcho, but whenever there's a crisis, or whenever it is perceived that there might be a crisis, that person is consulted. I call that person a leader. In every frame of life, therefore, we have leaders. The trouble is, those leaders don't know themselves, hence they fail to lead, and their family or their situation, they might have to go through a generation to allow another leader to emerge who is more conscious than the previous one. So in life, I have observed that the way how the Creator packaged life, He not only designed and allowed problems in the frame, but right in that context, He placed leaders, men and women, and in some instances children. If people only listen to them, and if they emerge, they could lead their people out. The examples are numerous. And so I want to give us an example of what I'm talking about in Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah. The children of Israel had been taken away captives. Under a gentleman named Ezra, he brought back a number of them who were exiled. They were coming back home. Jerusalem was in a terrible shape. It was broken down. And Ezra brought his men, they resettled, and they tried their best, but the wall remained in tatters. A gentleman who served the king of Assyria, he was his cupbearer, Nehemiah by name, felt this burden to go home and rebuild the walls, which is a noble task. Now, he wasn't elected, he wasn't running for anything, but he just felt a burden. And some of you listening to us, wherever you're from, you understand what I'm talking about. We are talking about of feeling a burden to resolve a problem, a known problem. And this guy, when he got there, he was mobilizing people. He took folks, he took considerable resources and favor from his own king. And as he was organizing, he found that people on the spot had major problems. Those people had a dream, but between where they were and experiencing this superabundant increase, they had issues. One of the issues was that they didn't have enough supplies. And so the leader Nehemiah was, Nehemiah in chapter 5, when he listened to them. Verse 6 says, when I heard their outcry and these charges, I was very angry, and I pondered them in my mind, and after, he said, I accused the officials and the nobles, and I told them, you are charging your own people interest. And the Jews in those days never, by law, could not charge interest if they were lending money to a Jew. But these guys were doing, and Nehemiah confronted them. It was bringing people who were being delivered from slavery back into slavery. And Nehemiah, the leader whose eyes were wide open, led the charge and said, y'all stop doing this. A little lengthy, but bear with me. When he made his presentations, leaders must, as leaders should. The nobles and the officials heard him. And in classical Nehemiah's leadership style, he convinced them, and they said, we will give it back. We will not demand anything more from them. You've convinced us, we have given back. We will give them back what is rightfully due to them. So these folks, because a leader came on the scene, these folks were able to experience superabundant increase.
I think what's also distinguishing there too, Pastor, is the leader, apart from coming on the scene, the whole aspect of listening and hearing the cry of your people. It is incumbent upon us as leaders not only to be enamored by the trappings of the office, but we must be prepared to listen to the cries of our people, and more than listen, work solution or find solution. Here was a leader who not only listened, but he summoned those who were being accused and those who were making the accusation. He summoned them. Whether you call it dialogue, whether you call it meeting, whether you call it meeting the stakeholders, whatever you call it, there was a man who was determined to solve the problems. He called them, met with them, and he was so convincing that they decided that they were going to return what they had gotten, whether by ill-gotten means or what have you. They were prepared to give it back. So here again we have a classic example of a leader who was able to bring his people together and to resolve an issue that could have really destroyed or put the children of Israel apart, set them against each other. But here is a good example of a leader.
I like how Nehemiah is selfless act. And I think as a leader, that is so critical. If the people you lead will experience superabundance, and clearly in the context of what we've just discussed, only a few may have been in a position to benefit. But Nehemiah recognizing that, look, this entire nation needs to benefit, and if this nation is going to benefit, well then people must be concerned with one another. And so we saw Nehemiah showing that concern, and the humility of Nehemiah as a leader also is so critical to the process, because only when you humble yourself, you begin to see the needs of people and the troubles that they're experiencing, and so you could identify. But if you remain aloof, it becomes extremely difficult for you to recognize what they're experiencing. And so Nehemiah had tremendous qualities in terms of how he really perceived situations and dealt with them.
One of the principles of teamwork requires that we work together. Together we achieve the extraordinary. And lots of times we want the extraordinary, but we don't want to do it together. But the only way it is going to be done is doing it together.
Right.
And for folks to come together, there must be an element of trust and an element of understanding that there is compassion and there is care. If I believe that you will hurt me or you're out to get me, it is hard sometimes while I want to trust and while I know that we need to work together. It's hard to actually do so. And so the principle remains the same. We can only do it together. But I love how Nehemiah created that kind of environment where he made everyone not just feel comfortable, but everyone feel as if they have a responsibility to ensure that this project is accomplished.
But still, we knew that Nehemiah, although he was doing a great job, he still had enemies.
Oh yes.
He still had enemies. I would like to read Leviticus 19:18. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against one of your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. You see, they have people, they're in concern about the Lord. They're concerned about themselves. So long they could make millions or billions, they contented. They would just throw Nehemiah one side, but Nehemiah was a man of God. He was looking direct into God's face and saying, yes, I will do this because this is good for the people.
Good observation. In 21st century, Sanballat and Tobiah, they have morphed. These present tormentors in Nehemiah's day, they have morphed into, these were officials. Yeah. These men had positions in their day, and they have morphed into these 21st century characters, doing the same thing, we have lots of people who are leniently sentenced of Tobiah and Sanballat, and they're doing the same mischief. But we need to observe Nehemiah. As a leader, Nehemiah was focused. And what we're saying to you as a parent, as a father, as a single parent mom, you heading your family, you have to remain focused. There's a new young lady emerging in American lawn tennis. I think her name is Stevens. And this young lady, I was reading about her in Times Magazine last night. It said about her, one of the strengths of her game is her focus. Once she begins to focus, and Serena, Miss Serena, felt the strength of her focus. the other day when she beat her, and Serena had to say, well, who's this child here, you know? And focus is very important. We must maintain our focus. As a leader, you're pulling your family. You might be the only one. Everything is against you. Yes, the enemy is right there within the frame.
Yeah.
But in that frame, you are the leader. Pull your family, your household, your community, your workplace. If you have national responsibilities, pull your folk out of the difficulties.
You know, it's fascinating as we continue to massage so many principles, I would say cardinal principles of being a good leader, as we talk about teamwork, being a good listener, being focused. But so many times we approach these principles from a head knowledge perspective. But I believe one of the signs of being a good leader, you must be able to put into practice and empower people so that they can even surpass where you have gone. And as we talk about the superabundant increase, it must not just be for us, but as leaders, we must be able to focus on developing people. And as we do that, they will be able to experience the superabundance that we're talking about also.
You know, we look at Nehemiah's and his qualities as a leader, and we see that he wasn't going to be partisan in his approach. Even as he listened to the people, he recognized that there was a wrong being done. And he was bold enough to speak to that issue. You know, he called the nobles and he called the accusers, and he laid down on the table what exactly should have been done. You know, as a leader, sometimes I call it in my home, I read the riot act. Mm-hmm. You know, I have to take a stand regardless of how others may feel. But there's a principle that must be followed. And so we have, as leaders, we have to lay down that principle regardless of how close we might be to the public, the high officials, or even to the persons that are low. We must take our stand and make sure that we empower, not only empower people, but see people in this process work together so for the benefit of everyone else. And Nehemiah stood out as a leader in this aspect where he took his stand and he called those officials together and he says, this is what is happening. And as according to the law, it is required that you do not exact interest from your own people. And these people listened because Nehemiah was asserting his leadership qualities and he was doing exactly as these people were looking for him to do. The value of family focus cannot be understated or overstated. The environment in which we live in today seems to be an environment where dog eat dog, you know, where there's a major fight and a devouring of each other. And if that creeps into the family, then the family will die because you will get rid of each other. And so to sustain the family, we need to be focused and to ensure that the culture that might be prevailing in the community does not come into the house. Yeah, you and I must be strong enough to recognize certain kinds of culture must not be a part of this family. Yes, you and I must be able, as fathers, as head of households, you and I must ensure that this family is moving in this direction. The children in this family, these are the principles by which we live. And never mind the dominant culture that exists.
Well,
you can establish.
Not only dog eat dog in the culture. Sometimes the dog do depend on bone for a diet. And we have in our culture the dog who brings the bone, carries the bone. So there's always an element of distrust. And persons are suspicious of one another, even in families. Listen, we have to develop a culture where you have to begin to trust people. You cannot just label somebody because of his appearance and say, don't trust that one and don't trust this one. He's from that clan, or this member of the family, they're leaning to the father side or the mother side. Yes, they have issues like that in the home. This child behaving like the father side family and that child behaving like the mother side family. And it all causes confusion. we have to meet and we have to decide where we are going, and we have to work together towards our destiny. Nationally, we have the best destiny we can think about. We have a wonderful motto that says, one people, one nation, one destiny. So, what is happening here?
You know, I can follow you. I'm quoting a friend of mine who recently returned from the interior, who said a Brazilian said to him, gold can't done in Guyana. Or Guyana gold can't done, something to that effect. Now, we talk about superabundance, all right? Superabundance. But there are the path to superabundance is fraught with a whole set of uncertainties, trickery, all kinds of things, you know, and subterfuge, you name it, it's there. You just introduce a critical element of trust. We look at Nehemiah. Nehemiah was persuasive. Nehemiah listened to the people as leaders, whether you were leading your family, whether you're leading a game of marbles. The leader is charged, or you're running a country, we're running a bank. The leader must listen. You must listen to what's coming. Feedback is very, very critical, very important. Nehemiah not only listened, but Nehemiah did something. Nehemiah introduced the element of trust, as was articulated just before. Nehemiah trusted, but he verified. After his wonderful motivational speech, the people said, the nobles and the officials, we will give it back, in verse 12 of Nehemiah 5. And we will not demand anything more from them. We will do as you say. Then Nehemiah trusted them. But it's critical. The next step Nehemiah took is, I summoned the priests and I made the nobles and officials take an oath to do what they had promised. So he took their promise. Sometimes people, in the face of evidence, melt and say, I bow. But you see, when they leave that room and they go into their safe space, where all the Sambalas and Tobias come and say, who you agree to? What position you? Who you do? You know you listen. And next thing you know, that person, their heart is changed, they hardened. When Nehemiah had them on this high plateau, Nehemiah said, I trust you guys, but I want to verify here. Is this what you... And he invited the power brokers, and he said, well, listen, everybody must take an oath. And once you took an oath in those days, you were bound by it. So at home, parents must trust. So if the son says he's going to play hockey, someday you must verify. During the time, you must leave your home and go and see if in fact you don't have to announce where you're going. If your daughter says, I'm going to the salon, you must verify. You might be surprised what you'll find. It is very important that we trust but verify.
You know, that speaks to the fact that we should not take things for granted. And sometimes, you know, we can fall into that situation where we say to ourselves, everything is all right, man, but I agree that we can trust, but we must verify. But another observation I would have made concerning Nehemiah is that he had a vision and he had a plan. If you're going to experience superabundant increase, it will not just come out of the blue like that. You must have some plan, some vision, a strategy, and we saw him strategizing in terms of rebuilding the wall and all of that. But beside that, the scripture made it very clear that Nehemiah had absolute faith in God. So when you put your vision or your plan together, you combine that with absolute faith in God, you are in a state of readiness for superabundant increase.
But Nehemiah introduced another element there called the fear of God. Not just faith, but the fear of God. Many times we make promises, and the reason we fail to fulfill our promises, the reasons are simple. We want to pull ourselves out of a tough spot. So we say, God, I promise. And once everybody down tools, well, not down tools, go back to work and stop fighting. And so we said, we got them, you know, we ain't got to do nothing. When the men had signed on the dotted line, verse 13, Nehemiah gave a very visual demonstration of what could happen. He also took out the folds of his robe and he said, in this way, may God shake out of their house and possessions anyone who does not keep this promise. So may such a person be shaken out and empty. You know, Nehemiah, like we would in our day pull out his pocket and he said, you see, he understood, he was demonstrating uncanny understanding of human life. When people are their backs are against the wall, they promise anything. He might pull out his pocket, as we would say in these days, and he empty and he say, you know, you sign on. But anybody who, you know, he was introducing the element of the fear of God. We must bring this to the table also. We must bring this to the table so that we must know there's another person in this equation. And if we fail to fulfill what we promised, he will deal with it.
You know, Nehemiah was stewarding his gift. The whole concept and notion of superabundance speaks to stewardship. And he was given the gift of leadership all through his life. Even being the cupbearer, you could see leadership. And praise God that he was so impacted by God that he wanted to serve his gift to his people. And so what he did, he discharged in a very responsible manner this gift of leadership. You can imagine if he did not come on the scene, what would have happened? If he had kept this gift to himself, what would have happened? So we are encouraging all. Steward your gift well, you never know who you might be impacting.
I pray that you will call the family together. Why not start the discussion over what you've heard today? And allow what you've heard to infiltrate the crevices of your family. I'm sure God has superabundant increase in store for you. And if you can only learn how to manage it together, you'll see how it is going to grow and blossom. We bless you and we bless this nation. Have a good night.
Yeah. Can I sing like I feel it? I'm telling you prayer.
We thank you for being part of Choices. Remember, you can join us at First Assembly for any of our regular weekly services. I am Celestia on behalf of the set, reminding you that your whole life is the sum of your choices. God bless you.